Hey guys, this is our book for the month of September. I'm making a little audiobook so that you can follow along with me. While you're listening to the audiobook, you're not watching me read. Instead, your eyes are on the book and your finger is tracking every word I say out loud, okay? Alright, so we're opening up to the dedication page right here. This book is dedicated to many people, to the gang of youngsters who inhabited the trees and the waters of the Potomac River so many years ago, and to the bit of Sam Gribley and the children and adults around me now. Next we have our contents. We're going to flip past that. That's all the different chapters. Author's preface. When I was in elementary school, I packed my suitcase and told my mother I was going to run away from home. As I envisioned it, I'd live by a waterfall in the woods and catch fish on hooks made from the forks of tree limbs, as I had been taught by my father. I would walk along the wildflowers and trees, listen to the birds, read the weather report, in the clouds and the wind, and stride down the mountainsides, independent and free. Wisely, my mother did not try to dissuade me. She had been through this herself. She checked my bag to see if I had my toothbrush and my postcard, to let her know how I was getting along, and kissed me goodbye. 40 minutes later, I was home. When my daughter Twig was in elementary school, she told me she was going to run away to the woods. I checked her backpack for a toothbrush and watched her go down the front steps, her shoulders squared confidently. I blew her a kiss and sat down to wait. Presently, she was back. Although wishing to run to the woods and live on our own seems to be inherited characteristics in our family, we are not unique. Almost everyone I know has dreamed at some time of running away to a distant mountain or island, castle or sailing ship, to live there in beauty and peace. Few of us make it, however. It is one thing to wish to go, and another matter to do it. I might have been able to do what Sam Gribley does in this book, live off the land, make a home, survive by wits and library research, for I had knowledge. My father, who was a naturalist and scientist, taught me the plants and animals of eastern forest and showed me where the wild edible fruits and tubers grew. On weekends along the Potomac River near Washington, D.C., where I was born and grew up, he and I boiled water in leaves and made rabbit traps. Together we made tables and chairs out of saplings bound with the braided inner bark of the basswood tree. My brothers, two of the first falconers in the United States, helped me in the training of a falcon. I had the know-how for surviving in the woods, and yet I came home. But not Sam. I said to myself when I sat down at my typewriter and began putting on paper this story, one that had been writing in my head for many years. The writing came easily. Sam needed a home. I remembered a huge tree my brothers had camped in on an island in the Potomac River. A tree would be Sam's home, and I knew how he would survive when foraging became tough. A falcon will be his provider, I said to myself. With ideas coming fast, the first draft was done. In 2 weeks, 5 revisions later, I was finished and off to the publisher. Back came a phone call from Sharon Benningham, the editor of E.P. Dutton's children's book department at the time. Elliot McCrae, the publisher, she said, won't print this book. He says parents should not encourage their kids to leave home. Discouraged, I hung up the phone and walked to the woods behind the house. As always, when I am in the wild wood, I very quickly forgot what was troubling me. A sequential crow from protecting its flock by watching the skies for hawks. A squirrel was building a nest for leaves for the winter. A spider was tapping out a message to his mate on the line of her web. Better to run to the woods than the city, I thought. Here there is the world to occupy the mind. The telephone rang. Sharon Benningham was back to the wire. She was almost singing. Elliot McCrae had changed his mind. And what, I asked her, had worked in the miracle? I simply told him it is better to have children run to the woods than the city, she said. He thought about that. Since he has a home in the woods of the Ardak Mountains, she goes off there alone himself. He suddenly understood your book. My Side of the Mountain will be published in spring of '59. From this date, I have been answering children's letters about Sam. Most want to know if he is a real person. Some, convinced that he is, have biked to Delhi, New York, from as far away as Long Island, New York, to find his tree, his falcon, weasel, and raccoon. To these and all others who ask, I say, there is no real Sam except inside of me. His adventures are the fulfillment of that day long ago when I told my mother I was going to run away, got as far as the edge of the woods, and came back. Perhaps Sam will fulfill your dreams too. Be you, writer or reader, it is a very pleasant to run away in this book. Then it starts, My Side of the Mountain. In which I hole up in a snowstorm. I am on my mountain in a tree home that people have passed without ever knowing that I am here. The house is a hemlock tree 6 feet in diameter, and I must be as old as the mountain itself. I came upon it last summer and dug and burned it out until I made a snug cave in the tree that I now call home. My bed is on the right as you enter and is made of ash slats and covered with deerskin. On the left is a small fireplace about knee-high. It is of clay and stones. It has a chimney that leads the smoke out throughout a knothole. I chipped out 3 other knotholes to let fresh air in. The air coming in is bitter cold. It must be below 0 outside, and yet I can sit here inside my tree and write with bare hands. The fire is small, too. It doesn't take much fire to warm this tree room. It is the 4th of December. I think it may be the 5th. I am not sure because I have not recently counted the notches in the aspen pole. That is my calendar. I have been just too busy gathering nuts and berries, smoking venison, fish, and small game to keep up with the exact date. The lamp I am writing by is deer fat poured into a turtle shell, with a strip of my old city's trousers for a wick. It snowed all day yesterday, and today I have not been outside since the storm began. And I am bored for the first time since I ran away from home 8 months ago to live on the land. I am well and healthy. The food is good. Sometimes I eat turtle soup, and I know how to make acorn pancakes. I keep my supplies in the wall of the tree in wooden pockets that I chop myself. Every time I have looked at those pockets during the last 2 days, I have felt just like a squirrel, which reminds me. I didn't see a squirrel one whole day before the storm began. I guess they are holed up and eating their stored nuts too. I wonder if the Baron, that's the wild weasel who lives behind the big boulder in the north of my tree, is also denned up. Well, anyway, I think the storm is dying down because the tree is not crying so much. When the wind really blows, the whole tree moans right down to the roots, which is where I am. Tomorrow I hope the Baron and I can tunnel out into the sunlight. I wonder if I should dig the snow. But that would mean I would have to put it somewhere, and the only place to put it is in my nice, snug tree. Maybe I can pack it with my hands as I go. I've always dug into the snow from the top, never up from under. The Baron must dig up from under the snow. I wonder where he puts what he digs. Well, I guess I'll know in the morning. When I wrote that last letter, I was scared and thought maybe I'd never go out of my tree. I had been scared for 2 days, ever since the first blizzard hit the Catskill Mountains. When I came up to the sunlight, which I did by simply poking my head into the soft snow and standing up, I laughed at my dark fears. Everything was white, clean, shining, and beautiful. The sky was blue, blue, blue. The hemlock grove was laced with snow. The meadow was smooth and white, and the George was sparkling with ice. It was so beautiful and peaceful that I laughed out loud. I guess I laughed because my first snowstorm was over, and it had not been so terrible after all. Then I shouted, "I did it!" My voice never got very far. It was hushed by the tons of snow. I looked for signs from the Baron Weasel. His footsteps were all over the boulder. Also, slides where he had played. He must have been up for hours enjoying the new snow. Inspired by his fun, I poked my head into my tree, and whistled. Frightful, my trained falcon flew to my fist, and we jumped and slid down the mountain, making big holes and trenches as we went. It was good to be whistling the carefree again, because I was sure scared by the coming of that storm. I had been working since May, learning how to make a fire with flint and steel, finding what plants I could eat, how to trap animals and catch fish, all this so that when the curtain of the blizzard struck the Catskills, I could crawl inside my tree and be comfortably warm and have plenty to eat. During the summer and fall, I had thought about the coming of winter. However, on the 30th day of December, when the sky blackened, the temperature dropped, and the first flakes swirled around me, I must admit I wanted to run back to New York. Even the first night I spent out in the woods when I couldn't get the fire started was not as frightening as the snowstorm that gathered behind the George and mushroomed up over my mountain. I was smoking 3 trout. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. I was busy keeping the flames low so they would not leap up from the burn of the fish. As I worked, it occurred to me that it was awfully dark for that hour of the morning. Frightful was leashed to her tree stub. She seemed restless and pulled at her tethers. When I realized that the forest was dead quiet, even the woodpeckers that had been trapped around me all morning were silent. The squirrels were nowhere to be seen. The juncans and the chickadees and the nuthatches were gone. I looked to see that the Baron Weasel was doing. He was not around. I looked up. From my tree you can see the George beyond the meadow. White water pours between the black, wet boulders and cascades into the valley below. The water that day was as dark as the rocks. Only the sound told me it was still falling. Above the darkness stood another darkness. The clouds of winter, black and fearsome. They looked as wild as the wind that were bringing them. I grew sick with fright. I knew I had enough food. I knew everything was going to be perfectly all right. But knowing that didn't help. I was scared. I stamped out the fire and pocketed the fish. I tried to whistle for Frightful, but couldn't purse my shaking lips tight enough to get out anything but. So I grabbed her by the hind straps that are attached to her legs, and we drove through the deerskin door into my room in the tree. I put Frightful on the bedpost and curled up in a ball on the bed. I thought about New York and the noise and the lights and how a snowstorm always seemed very friendly there. I thought about our apartment too. At that moment it seemed bright and lightened and warm. I had to keep saying to myself, there were 11 of us in it. Dad, Mother, 4 sisters, 4 brothers, and me. And not one of us liked it, except perhaps little Nina, who was too young to know. Dad didn't like it even a little bit. He had been a sailor once, but when I was born, he gave up the sea and worked on the docks in New York. Dad didn't like the land. He liked the sea, wet and big and endless. Sometimes he would tell me about great-grandfather Gribley, who owned the land in the Catskill Mountains and filled the trees and built a home and plowed the land only to discover that he wanted to be a sailor. The farm failed and great-grandfather Gribley went to sea. As I lay with my face buried in the sweet grassy smell of my deerskin, I could hear Dad's voice saying, "That land is still in the family's name. Somewhere in the Catskills is an old beach with the name Gribbly carved on it. It marks the northern boundary of Gribbly's Folly. The land is no place for a Gribbly." "The land is no place for a Gribbly," I said. "The land is no place for a Gribbly, and here I am, 300 feet from the beach, with Gribbly carved on it." I fell asleep at that point, and when I awoke, I was hungry. I cracked some walnuts, got down the acorn flour, and had pounded it with a bit of ash to remove the bite. Reached out the door for a little snow and stirred up some acorn pancakes. I cooked them on top of a tin can, and as I ate them, smothered with blueberry jam, I knew that the land was just the place for a Gribbly.